say definitively that religions are all bullshit.
Welcome to Brainstorm.
We have the explicit tag for a reason.
This is a base level argument to a higher level morality.
I get paid to science?
To science as much as one can science.
What the hell was my point?
Trigger warning. The Brainstorm podcast will criticize your most cherished beliefs. We attack nonsense in all its forms and discuss difficult subjects. If you peddle pseudoscience, supernatural woo, or religious dogma, then this is not your safe place. This is the home of hardcore skepticism.
All right. Hi, and welcome to Brainstorm Podcast. This is episode 51, and today is August 5th, 2016. I'm Corey, and my panel tonight are Angela.
Hello.
Renee.
Hello.
And Leo.
Hey, folks.
With the always amazing Dave.
Hooyah.
Doing sound here in Roman Empire Studios in Regina, Saskatchewan. Tonight's show is brought to you by Reasonist Inc., atheist, skeptic, and science-based apparel. You can find them at reasonistinc.com. Tonight's guest is Greta Vosper, the atheist minister of the West Hill United Church. She's also a best-selling author of 2 books and the founder of the Canadian Centre for Progressive Christianity. Thanks, Greta, for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
So I guess, what is an atheist minister?
Well, it's kind of the way it sounds. Minister. I'm a minister in a United Church congregation in Toronto, and I don't believe in a traditional theistic understanding of God. So I am an atheist. So I'm an atheist minister. When you put the two of them together, that's what it ends up.
That's
Okay.
cool. That's cool.
It's an interesting idea.
You figured that out yet? too much for you on a Friday night?
It might be too much.
I mean, I don't be insulting or anything. I'm trying to be funny, but to me, it sounds like a vegan butcher. It's just like 2 words that just don't go together.
Yeah, well, the vegan butcher thing has been used before, so you're not being very original. And
Wow, I thought I was.
The fact that I've been a vegetarian for 35 years kind of moots that point too. No, it really, I think that the reason that it's such an oxymoron is that most people who are not members of a liberal mainline denomination or trained theologically within such a denomination don't really know what we're taught at theological college. So there's nothing that I really talk about that I didn't learn at the knee of United Church clergy and theological instructors. So I'm just, the difference between me and my colleagues is that I'm naming it in a way that they are uncomfortable naming it. So while many of them, and somebody just did a survey, and it turns out that about a third of the people who responded to the survey believe in a traditional understanding of God, and 2/3 don't. So if those 2/3, if the God that they believe in, or what they mean when they use the word God, is not a traditional understanding of a theistic God, a supernatural God who lives in some other realm and intervenes in human affairs or has the capacity to do so, then, they don't believe in that kind of God, right? And I'm just saying that I don't believe in that kind of God, and I really don't want people to think that I do. So I don't want to use that language anymore.
Wow.
So would you say that you believe in a sort of God? Or when you talk about, when you preach or when you talk to the congregation, do you talk about God in any way?
Well, that's an interesting question and a really good one. And the answer to that would be given differently by different people in the congregation. I mean, one woman who had been coming to the church for a few months at one point said to someone else in the congregation, she finally noticed that things were a little different. And they said, does Greta ever talk about God? And the person that she asked said, oh, she's talking about God all the time. If she had asked somebody in another pew, they would have said, oh, Greta never talks about God. I don't use the word, but what I'm talking about, which is the way that we should live and how we should build relationships that respect each other's and enhance each other's dignity. Some people would say that is God, but I don't use that word anymore. I mean, it's unhelpful and it's misunderstood by 99.99999% of the world.
So that leaves a very, very small percentage of you
that really knows what I would be talking about if I used that word, right?
Yes,
So it became an impediment to me doing my job.
So how long were you a minister before you started to identify it, like to use less God words?
Almost a decade. I started my first, the first church I was in was, well, maybe more than a decade. It was in 1990. I started working in a congregation before I was ordained. I was ordained in 1993.
Okay.
And this work really began in 2001. After I had become aware of how much misunderstanding there was out there, not just in my congregation, but in many congregations in the area that I serve, and I struggled with what that meant, like why, with all the training and understanding that I had, why I wasn't able to get that across to my congregation, and I realized that it was because everything I asked them to sing or say or listen to reinforced this like pre-Copernican worldview and a supernatural God. So except what I said in my sermon time when I tried to deconstruct it all, but then right after that we were right back into the old model. So all of the language that wrapped the entire service up was all very focused on God and God's activity in the world and Jesus and whatever it was that Jesus was supposed to be doing for us. And, we privileged the Bible as the only text we ever read from. I just realized that it was a serious problem. And one Sunday I spontaneously preached a sermon that deconstructed God. I say spontaneously because I wasn't planning to do it. At least I wasn't consciously planning to do it.
Wow.
And so after that, I had a conversation with my board because I realized that, things had shifted potentially dramatically, and they were ready for that conversation. And that's the most extraordinary part about this work is not my beliefs, because many of my clergy colleagues share my beliefs. It's that I'm in a congregation that lets me share those beliefs and share them openly and create a community that engages in values and in, striving toward right relationship with self, others, and the planet. And they allow me to do that without ecclesial trappings. So they're the extraordinary group in this whole conversation.
It's interesting. So when you went to the board, they also kind of ascribe to the non-traditional belief in a theistic God?
Well, many of them had been, several people in the congregation had been part of a book study group that had been established long before I came to the church. And they had explored a lot of progressive liberal theologians. Tom Harper's books, you're probably familiar with Tom Harper. His book, For Christ's Sake, was about the divinity of Jesus, and that was one of the books that they studied back in the 1980s, I think. They'd done studies on books by John Spong and Marcus Borg, all of these sort of people who have been writing the kind of contemporary theology that has been available to scholars and within theological colleges and academically for decades and decades and decades. And since probably 1960, beginning with John Robinson's book, Honest to God, since then, that material has become more accessible to lay people. And so people at West Hill had explored quite a little bit of that. So there was a core group of people who did not believe that the Bible was the authoritative word of God for all time, didn't believe in the virgin birth, didn't believe that Jesus was the divine, exclusive Son of God and exclusive source to salvation. I mean, a lot of people didn't believe any of that stuff anyway. So, however, for many of them, the forms that were used in church were very familiar and comfortable. And for some of them, when those forms began to shift and change, that became an issue.
So almost like the ritual type was more important than the idea of a traditional God, if I'm getting it.
Well, yes, sort of. I mean, for some people, I mean, there were people who left the congregation who theologically would probably be on exactly the same page that I am, but they left the congregation because we were no longer exclusively using the Bible. Or we weren't using the Bible at all anymore. And we stopped using the Lord's Prayer in the service. Now, we had only started using the Lord's Prayer in the service since I had arrived there. So it wasn't a tradition that had, been around forever and ever. It had been around for about maybe 10 years, less than that. But removing it from the service was very disturbing to some people. So those kinds of things. So it wasn't really, when people left the congregation, it wasn't really their theological beliefs that took them out of the congregation. It's what I call, we closed a portal through which people accessed that part of themselves where they could explore deep issues, deep inside them, and, work toward understanding what life meant, right? And for some people, they required trigger words like God and Jesus, and they required biblical stories. And once they heard those things, they could relax into that space. Other people don't need that. And so we closed that portal, and those people that needed those words, those key words to get into that space, they had to find another place that used them. And there are a lot of those places. So, but there weren't places for people that don't want to use those words, that don't believe in a supernatural God, that don't want to listen to archaic texts and try to find all the meaning about their lives in those texts. I mean, so we've created a space where people who, whether they believe or not, and we have people who are, progressive Christians, I would say, who still believe in God, and many who identify as believing in God, but probably not a traditional understanding of God. And we have many people who are secular humanists, and people who are free thinkers, and people who are atheists, and people who don't want to be labeled. So,
Wow, that's quite the group.
It's very interesting to me.
That's very interesting.
So do you still preach on the stories of Jesus?
No, I don't.
Okay. And then the second question, so how does the congregation view the story of Jesus, and how do you personally view it? Do most people view it as factual and historical, that it actually happened, a lot of the stuff, or is it more of a good story that was passed on through generations? Or
well, many people in the United Church have had access over the last few decades to contemporary scholarship that has sought to discern who the historical Jesus was. And the people at West Hill had certainly studied those books before I arrived at the church, and we continue to do that work. A member of the congregation led a program on using Bart Ehrman's book on the New Testament, A Brief Introduction to the New Testament or something, which really questions a lot of what is in the New Testament, and places most of it having been written long after Jesus died, and explores why the Gospels were written the way they were written, who they were written for, and all of those kinds of things. So most of the people in my congregation, I would say, did not believe that the Gospels represented an historical Jesus at all, and so would question also the concept of divinity, and how that was ascribed to Jesus. So, and that would match how I felt about it. I mean, Jesus, as we went through this work, what we did was we saw it. In my book, I refer to Jesus as, an itinerant Middle Eastern preacher who had a great posthumous marketing team. I mean, that otherwise we wouldn't know who he was, right? So,
yes.
so, I mean, many of my colleagues focus on Jesus and the words attributed to him in the Gospels, as opposed to the epistles, which are generally referred to predominantly by evangelicals. But liberals tend to look at the words of Jesus and find in them the call to living compassionately and, trying to see everyone as your neighbor and trying to be present to them in whatever way, and, dealing with poverty and all of those kinds of things. And that, like every other interpretation, is a cherry picking interpretation. So really we have a mix of stories about someone who may have said some very iconoclastic things that had meaning and purpose, and he may have, when I think about that man, I think about someone who poured his life out to create a better community for the people that he knew and loved. Well, there are billions of people who have lived and poured their lives out trying to create a better community for the people that they love. So really what we did was we took Jesus off that pedestal and we put him in the same line with all those other people. And we now source our inspiration from the lives and stories of those peoples whose stories have been recorded, knowing that most of the people who did that work will never be remembered because their stories were never captured and written down. So our inspiration comes from novels, it comes from literature, it comes from we don't generally draw on other religious texts for the same reasons that we don't generally draw on the Bible. We use contemporary artists. We use music. We use, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There's some very interesting sources for inspirational material, and we use whatever is going to edify or convict the congregation. Like the purpose is to call us to right relationship, and that's what what comes into the service has to be worthy of the people that are gathered there, and that's a pretty high bar.
Yeah. Wow.
What you're describing seems very much not like religion to me.
Well, it depends what you think religion is. In many ways, and there's Philip, I can't remember his last name. That's going to haunt me. He's come up with 5 different things that are basic elements of religion, and I like them. The first one is transmission. Religion is the way that we transmit the things that are important to us to future generations, and we do it with ritual and symbols and language, right? So we transmit that. So religion helps us transmit that. It translates everyday experiences gives them meaning, helps us understand them differently. It helps us transcend ourselves and our own preoccupation with ourselves, and challenges us to see beyond ourselves. It transforms us as we engage with those kinds of things. And there's another one. There's 5. I've only remembered 4. But
pretty good.
But those kinds of things are what we do, right? That's what we're about. We want to help people create meaningful lives, and that's really what we do together. What if you walked in on a Sunday morning and you had no idea who we were or what we did or what the particular slant of the congregation was? You'd see us do the same things that many people in churches do. We stand up, we sing songs, we sit down, we hear readings, sometimes we participate in rituals that may look familiar, and sometimes we participate in rituals that you've never seen before. We do things like that, but So it feels very much like church, and that's why some people don't notice that I never use the word God and I don't read from the Bible for a while, because it feels like church.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
So what?
You're all stunned. You have, no idea what to say.
It's fascinating.
It's very. It's.
I just
it's
don't want to
not
hog
what
all the
we're
questions.
used to thinking of at all.
No. So tell me what you're used to thinking of. Like, how does this break the rules? Does it break the rules?
Well, I don't know. What are the rules?
Well, I don't know. Like,
It's
what is it? Is there anything it's supposed to look like?
I'm going to tell a very brief story of the first time that I came into contact with this sort of view on religion or Christianity. I grew up as a fairly evangelical Christian, and I went to work for a somewhat religious, like vaguely religious organization, and they ascribe to pretty much exactly what you've been saying. So very, very liberal, kind of inspirational stuff that we can draw from certain things. And for me at first, that was heresy. Like, I'm like, this is not at all what religion is supposed to be. This is not what Christianity is.
Yeah.
And that was actually sort of, a segue into opening my mind to different things. So I realized that it was actually something positive. But I had a huge shock when I first went from evangelical Christianity to hearing other interpretations of I guess, Christianity.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that that's quite a normal experience when people end up in an iteration of Christianity that doesn't reflect what they have been raised in or what they're currently worshiping in, or whatever you want to call it. And people often say to me, well, how can you call yourself a Christian? Well, we have been the Christian tradition has been casting people out of it, since it first began, right? So I don't see myself any different than all of those other iterations. And in fact, if the church, I believe strongly that if the church had allowed itself to be morphed and changed as we came to understand our world more clearly, and scientifically and with reason, I think that what we're doing at West Hill would be right in the middle of the road. We wouldn't be considered, a wacko fringe or whatever some people call us, an abomination. We wouldn't be considered an abomination. So I think that one of the reasons that this work is so important is that when you come to West Hill, if you're an evangelical Christian, there's nothing that happens at West Hill to which you would object. There are things that you would not find there that you would prefer to find, but you would not hear us saying anything that was antithetical to the underlying, I was going to say beliefs, but it's not beliefs, antithetical to the way that those in an evangelical tradition seek to invite their members to live, right? And so neither is someone who is a Buddhist or someone who is Muslim or someone who is Jewish or someone who is, any other faith tradition. When they come to West Hill, we talk using everyday language, and some people hear it and interpret it as me talking about what their God is challenging them to live up to. And some of them hear it as me, reminding them what their mother told them when they were a child. And some of them hear it as me inspiring them, to live out values to which they're just being introduced as important. So I don't think that we do anything that would offend anyone. And that's why I started saying the reason that I think this is so important is that I don't think humanity has the privilege to divide itself up along religious lines anymore. We have so many ways that we can divide ourselves, and adding religion to that is problematic now. So, 600 years ago, it was a valid way to identify the people, the tribe to whom we belonged. But now it's just dangerous. And so if we can inspire people to recognize that there are things toward which we yearn, that we can come together as individuals and bring them, support one another as we seek to live those things out, and lament together when we don't, but that we can do it beyond these divisions that have, rent the human fabric for many years, then that's a really important project. So that's why I think what we're doing is important. And the reason that I've kept doing it in the United Church of Canada is because I thought that the United Church of Canada was the only denomination in the world who would be able to make that kind of step.
Yeah.
And apparently I'm maybe wrong on that.
So there was some stuff happening recently to that end. Was there a meeting? Was there a vote? No, there was an interview on the 29th of June. Okay. There were 24 members of a committee that interviewed me through 4 members, which means that the 24 of them asked questions, but only 4 of them did it verbally. The rest of them sort of like email or.
Well, they were all in the room. But the questions that they had come up with were only asked by 4 people.
Okay.
So that interview took place on the 29th of June, and my understanding was that they were remaining behind to make a decision about whether or not I was suitable to continue in ministry in the United Church. But I'm not going to actually be advised of that decision until, I think, the 8th of September. And then there will be a meeting on the 15th of September, which will take the recommendation from that group and make a decision about whether I remain in the United Church as a minister.
That's heavy stuff. So how do you live in the middle of that? Do you just keep doing what you're doing?
Well, I keep doing what I'm doing because I have a congregation that believes that what we're doing is really important, and they're an extraordinary group of people. So they're very involved in this. When I arrived at the hearing, there were 30 of them camped out on the front lawn of the building with signs and buttons, and it was fabulous. So and they sat there for the whole time. They sat there. We came out about 3.5 hours later, and they were all still sitting there. So it was great. So they've been amazing. So the challenge, it's been very frustrating. It's taken a year and almost a year and a half of my ministry away from me. Writing projects I was engaged in, went by the side of the road. I couldn't do them anymore. The congregation was celebrating its 65th anniversary. We missed out on most of the things we had planned for that. It's taken a lot of energy. It's taken, a ton of financial resources. So it's really undermined. It's undermined our belief in the United Church of Canada. It's undermined my belief in the United Church of Canada. It's not the United Church of Canada that I believed that it was. So that's been hard to come to grips with.
Yeah, that would be tough.
Yeah.
Huh. That's fascinating to me. That is totally fascinating to me.
So, assuming they rule that what you're doing doesn't fit their, guidelines, what then? What is the next step?
Well, they have some options. They can ask me to take a course on theology or something and come back to them with a changed mind in 6 months. But I don't imagine that would be that effective. Pretty sure it wouldn't, especially if it was taught by somebody in their theological colleges, which will teach me everything I already know. So
that's right.
That would be a bit tricky. But they have the right to remove me from the roles of the church, which means I can no longer identify as a United Church minister or call myself reverend, but I don't call myself reverend anyway. It means that I could no longer be the settled minister at West Hill United Church. And so West Hill would need to decide what they wanted to do as a result of that. They recognize that they have a choice to make if that happens, whether they would remain in the United Church of Canada or not. If they chose to leave the United Church of Canada, they would lose their building, which they have paid for over the last 50 years. They've invested in that building and continue to do so. So they would lose all of that investment, and they would have to find a way to continue as a community outside of the United Church of Canada, if they chose to do that. And if they chose to do that, then I will definitely be part of that work.
That was going to be my next question. What was next for you?
Well, I mean, I think that's what we would do. In February, West Hill joined the Oasis Network.
Okay.
A year ago, almost 2 years ago now, we had started a satellite community on the other side of Toronto just because we had so many people visiting us from distances, and we weren't able to have them come regularly. We've had a visitors and travelers lunch the first Sunday of every month for several years now, so that people who come from a distance get some time with the congregation, like they get to know each other even though they're not there every Sunday. And it also gave people who have strong commitments to other congregations an opportunity to sneak out one Sunday and come and be with a community that spoke in language that they felt more comfortable with. So we've done that for a long time. So we started a satellite community in Mississauga, and we started it once a month. And that group chose to become kind of like a dinner church. And so we do that every month. But the fact that we only met once a month meant that it didn't really cohere as a group in the same way that a community meeting every week does. And so it didn't establish an independent leadership in the way that we had hoped it would. So we had hoped that within a year it would kind of be leading itself, and then we'd plant another one somewhere else and hold that one for a year and then let it do its own thing and then plant another one. So we were going to replicate ourselves several times. But having worked on it for a year and realizing that it was still dependent on my husband, Scott, and I on our leadership, we realized that wasn't a model that we could keep replicating, right? Because there's only so much of us. So we went looking for a model that would maybe create something that met on a weekly basis. And we found that in the Oasis Network.
Okay.
It has communities, two very strong communities, one in Houston and one in Kansas City. And it has a number of other communities that have also emerged since then, and since those two have started, and several others that are beginning to cohere now. So we associated with them, and we began the process of launching an Oasis community in Toronto, in the core of Toronto, because we're way out the east end of Toronto. Okay. It's an hour and a half on transit to get to us. So, so we really aren't in the center of the city. So this, when we get this Oasis Network community going, it will meet on a weekly basis and have a service type gathering, which adheres to the principles of the Oasis, which are really come down to the most basic one is that people are more important than beliefs. And, it works with that and builds from that. So we're excited about that project, and we'll keep doing that project, regardless of what happens with the United Church of Canada.
Oh, wow. That is very cool.
And the hope is that, my hope is that we will establish those communities across the country, because I believe that there's lots of background here, but well-being, the most important thing to me is not about creating a church. The most important thing to me is re-engaging people in civic activity. Yeah. And we have lost that engagement. And I think that the loss of liberal mainline churches has had a lot to do with that. Because when you engage in that kind of community on a regular basis, your well-being switch flips from, I'm okay, to flourishing. And when people are flourishing, they feel confident enough to walk outside their house and get to know their neighbors. And they feel confident enough to participate in community activities and believe that they can make a difference there. And so civic engagement, I think, is tied very closely to participation in communities of meaning, communities where people talk about meaning, communities where people build deep and lasting relationships. And that's what happens at West Hill. We build deep and lasting relationships. So my end game is actually building civic engagement, right? It's not building churches. So my hope is that as people recognize the importance of being connected in community and what it can do for them personally and what it can do for their communities, that they will be able to find a place that does not require talking in ancient, archaic, ecclesial, or some other kind of religious language that doesn't require that you find meaning and purpose and value in an ancient text, and doesn't require that you live according to strict religious guidelines, but that really says, who are you? And what is it that you have to offer this community? And what is it you really need from us? And in the answering of those questions, I think the groundwork for creating meaningful community exists, and I think can be nurtured.
That kind of really speaks to my journey in a way, because when I became an atheist, I hadn't been to, when I identified as an atheist, I hadn't been to church for probably 15 years. But when I became an atheist, I was really excited, and I wanted to associate with people that were similarly minded, and I became more aware of my fellow person and excited about, that civic involvement that you talk about. And I mean, I would love to be able to be a part of a community. However, in the atheist, if you can call it a community, sometimes it's frustrating because it's like herding cats. And when we tried to plan our conference this spring, it was tough because there's so many people that are like, I have this opinion, but I don't want to help out, and they don't necessarily understand the quote unquote greater good that I think I feel that's because I want to leave a legacy, whether or not like I just want to leave the world better than I have come into it. And I think that it's really hard to translate. And I think you're in a really interesting position, especially, being in the United Church, but also, becoming a part of the Oasis network. That's a really interesting kind of intersection, I guess.
I think that one of the things that happens when people when they let go of traditional religious beliefs is that process often happens in isolation. People they don't feel that they can speak with the people that they know and love. They think that they're going to be rejected. So it's a very private, isolated process. So then when you're trying to bring people together, it's not so much that there's a defensiveness, I don't think, as that there's a sense that I figured this out on my own and you're not going to tell me what I figured out, right?
Yeah.
And so it's difficult to create a group that can cohere around a single principle or a number of principles.
Yeah.
And there's often a lot of debate and anger. And also it's consistent with my belief that the left eats its young. There's always somebody who is better at living out those ideals. And, so they if somebody else is living them out better than I am or not as well as I am, I'm just glad that they're living them out, right? But if we look at people who aren't vegans or aren't, even vegetarians, or if vegans look at vegetarians with disgust, that is not helpful. And no. I think that when you're in a community that's building relationships, and the whole point is relationships, we can get beyond that kind of stuff. But we see it, around political elections. I mean, it's all over the place.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
The whole, what's happening in the after the Sanders Bernie Sanders, like what's happening there. Like we are notorious for crippling ourselves in that way, and we need to find ways to get over it. And yeah. So I'm sorry that hasn't been easy, but I totally understand it.
Well, and I mean, I do too, and I think it's just fascinating that you're talking about that, and I mean that really resonates with me. I mean, as a female mother of a 4-year-old, and that desire to create community and support, and as a woman too, like that's a big issue. I want to be able to support other people and through that support myself as well.
Yeah.
So,
and there's also amongst people who have moved away from religious traditions, there's some PTSD stuff that goes on there.
Oh, definitely.
And so some people, the idea of standing up and singing a song together gives them hives. Like they can't do that because they had to do that in their previous setting. But they'll listen to music that's inspirational and they'll be okay with that, right?
Yeah.
So you're dealing with a lot of different things that have happened, and you're dealing sometimes with people who are not out. So they may come quiet. We had one guy who would come to West Hill periodically, but if anyone had found out that he was there, he would have lost his marriage, his children, his job, his entire life, right? So he came sort of under cover of darkness when he could get away from his normal church, in which he was a worship leader in a Pentecostal church. So there's a lot that you're caring for when you're trying to create that kind of community.
Yeah, you would take all kind of people.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. I don't want to hog all the questions.
No, that's fine. I'm trying to absorb everything.
Well, I was just wondering, does West Hill do a lot of ecumenical work with trying to connect with other churches, other denominations, other religious, I guess, groups, or is it more within the United Church?
No, we haven't done a lot of that work. We do a considerable amount of sort of what you'd call outreach work or mission work. We're very active in Indigenous peoples' issues and have done work around that for some time, including a couple of years ago when the federal government was not sending money to First Nations schools on reserves and providing them with the materials they needed to start schools. We took a petition to Ottawa and had it read in the House of Commons with about 3,000 signatures on it.
Oh, wow.
To get some change in education and a number of other issues. And we've been active in that in a manner that I think goes beyond some of what the United Church has done, despite its work towards right relationship. I think that we don't want that to just be rhetoric anymore. We want to actually do stuff. And so we've been doing stuff. We've also worked to shift some of the stuff around homelessness in the neighborhood and continue to provide food and needs for people as those emerge. We have provided sanctuary on 3 different occasions, totaling about almost 4 years that we've had people living in our church who would otherwise be deported to situations that they did not want to return to, or life-threatening return to torture situations. So we do that kind of work. I worked on an interspirituality committee for a while when the Toronto waterfront was being redeveloped, and kind of I didn't have a falling out with them, but the interfaith requirement, or their requirement that people of different faiths accept and respect all forms of spiritual expression, I wasn't willing or able to agree to that, because there are forms of spiritual expression that deeply harm the human community, I believe. And so I think it's Stephen Law who talks about respect creep. And when you try to respect the traditions of people of other faiths, you often end up essentially embracing those traditions because you don't state that you don't accept them. And so interfaith stuff, I haven't been very popular in interfaith conversations, but we have enough work to do, and we support people on this journey around the world. The work that we do and the resources that we create are used in lots of different places as people find their way in this new way of developing communities and moving old communities.
We should be
also quiet.
Yeah. We should be friends on Facebook so I can, stalk you on social media so I can.
Okay.
I just
I'm easy to find.
I guess one of the things that has been popping into my head as you've been talking is the United Church the best tool or best, venue for your message, or is there? What about something like Unitarian?
Unitarians. All along I've believed the United Church is the denomination that could make the shift that I believe needed to be made. And I think that the first thing that needed to be done is to say that the Bible is not the authoritative word of God for all time. But that kind of that was kind of undermined in 2012 when a motion was made that was passed that identified the Bible as the authoritative text of the United Church of Canada. And we had that conversation in 1992 and refused to agree. We couldn't agree that the Bible was the authoritative text or an authoritative text. So we lost that in 2012, and I was pretty disturbed about that. And then in 2009, shortly after my first book was written, I received a number of emails from people who were in ministry positions who were letting me know that they were going to come out to their congregations as not believing in a traditional understanding of God. And I was concerned for their security because I felt that they could easily be fired or find themselves in a difficult situation in a congregation. So I went to the National Church office and spoke with two of the most senior staff members of the United Church of Canada to implore them to work with me to create some kind of a system that would protect clergy who identified as wanting to bring their congregations into the 21st century theologically. And in the conversation, one of them asked me if they said, I don't think we're really moving in a progressive direction, Greta. We haven't made a decision that that's what we want to do. And I said, well, why wouldn't we do that? I mean, we've been moving in a progressive direction since we, were formed in 1925. And he said, well, you don't really want a lily white pew, do you? And I said, I don't know what you mean by that. And he said, well, if we want to attract the immigrant population, we're going to have a more conservative theology. And I was flabbergasted by that.
Like gosh, bad reason to
very bad reason. And I was flabbergasted by that. But when I look back on it now, and I said, the people in my pews that are not lily white are there because their communities either don't accept them or because they know that the United Church stands for things that they want to be aligned with, right? Anyway, so years later, looking back on that and having just read Robert Jones's new book, The End of White Christian America, I recognized that those two senior staff people were intimately familiar with Reginald Bevy's work, which said that religion was going to flourish in Canada, but it was not going to be predominantly white Protestant mainline religion. It was going to be fueled, as it always has been, by immigration, and immigration was no longer predominantly WASP. So I think that the United Church senior staff people had that discussion and decided that if the United Church was going to survive, it was going to have to shift along with immigration patterns. And the assumption that was a more conservative clientele I think is problematic, but I think that that's what's happened. And so we now have a more conservative church than we had 8 or 9 years ago. And the people who are demanding that this review happen and who are questioning the right for me to speak openly about what it was I was taught in theological college, I think that it's a different church than the one that I have poured my life into for the last 25 years.
Wow.
So I thought the United Church was the denomination that would do this. But I'm not convinced of that anymore.
Seems as though it may have changed.
Yeah, I think it did. And I think it did intentionally, whether or not people on the ground knew that was happening. I think that the senior staff in the church knew that was happening, and then they did it quite intentionally.
Devious.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, they were trying to protect the institution rather than the legacy of the institution. And the legacy of the institution has always been, and this is when I speak internationally about the United Church, when I speak anywhere, not just internationally, I talk about the United Church as this big table that has all these different perspectives around it. And, it's a very diverse group of people, but there's always an empty chair at the table. And the United Church has always had the courage to place that chair there and to invite the person or the group from which it most does not want to hear to sit down at that table and have a conversation. And the root word of conversation is conversion. And the United Church has been converted over and over again because it has been convicted by the voice of the person in that chair.
Yeah.
And I see now that maybe that's a United Church that I believed existed, but maybe it can't exist anymore because to do so risks its future. And so it's not quite willing to do that. I mean, it can do it in ways, that are approved, but this is definitely not approved. So.
But it seems like, religion it seems to do better if it's going to be reformed. Like the religions, obviously, the ones that don't change easily or often, they don't do as well, aren't as popular.
Yeah, I think that religions start to calcify, and they can transform at great cost, but if they just stay the same, and that's what the United Church has done, it has risked that kind of change.
That's
when it ordained women, and then when it allowed the ordination of gays and lesbians, but technically it hasn't given a blanket approval to gays and lesbian ministers because it allows congregations to make that decision. So there are many congregations that would not accept gays or lesbians or would not do same-sex marriage. Like that's not just a given in the United Church of Canada. Because it doesn't force anybody to do anything. So, yeah.
Well, it's not over yet.
It's not over till it's over.
It's right. And you're not finished yet.
I'm not finished, but my history with the United Church might be briefer than I thought it was going to be.
You'll definitely leave a legacy, if nothing else.
Yeah. We're all working on our legacies.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
I'm still
processing.
Yeah. I'm still,
I'll email you in a week with like 8 more questions.
That's fine.
I think the comment to make is that it's strange that it started off kind of a talk about theology, and now it's seems to be all the movements are very political. Like it's kind of a interesting behind the scenes look.
It's an interesting switch to
Yeah.
It's not about beliefs, like you say. It's about politics.
Instead of worrying about spirituality, it's now strictly in, the realm of politics.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this rise in a desire for spirituality. I mean, the rise of the nuns in the States,
mm-hmm.
and also in Canada, where so many people no longer affiliate with a religious institution, but many of them identify as spiritual. Well, there's a lot of work being done within the traditional church, which is trying to attract those people, and that sells the story that if we just make church a little bit different, those people will come back. And I don't think that that's true. But I use the word masturbation a lot when it comes to the church.
Yeah.
We are caught in this ecclesial masturbation and liturgical masturbation and spiritual masturbation, where what we're doing is just to try to make us feel good. Mm-hmm. And we no longer look outside our doors and try to figure out how we can actually make them feel good, or how we can engage and be them and do something different, or how we can be part of the world and have a significant say in what's going on. We don't talk about that anymore. We talk about, we create liturgies that make us feel good, right? And I think that this is part of the pattern at this point in time. The decline, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. You become so self-absorbed that you don't pay attention to anything that's going on around you, and I think that's happening. And we have congregations that are focused almost exclusively on creating some kind of a spiritual high. I think that happens in a lot of evangelical congregations, creating some kind of an emotional, spiritual high that get people through the next week. And in mainline denominations, we create these deeply intense symbolic rituals that fill a spiritual need, right? But don't really do much other than that. And I think we have to look outside that and find out, what is the cost of that? Are we all just, in our living rooms making ourselves feel great, or what? I think we have to ask ourselves, what is religion for? What is this about, and what do we want it to be for? Mm-hmm. And if it's to anesthetize an entire generation, okay, that's what you want to do. Go ahead and do it. That's not what I want to do.
No. One of our listeners.
Yeah, Greta, we have a question here from one of the listeners. This is from Nathan. He's wanting to know, what do you think of the state of the atheist humanist movement in general, and what areas need improvement in your opinion? I
am concerned about it because I think, as I said earlier, I think we have this tendency to put down anybody who doesn't come at it with exactly the same ideas that we do, and we have to find a way to respect and celebrate diversity within that movement. I also think we have to get far beyond the amount of religion bashing that we do. I don't see any purpose in that. And when I spoke at the American Humanist Association, I saw that. I was part of a panel in which one of the members did that, much to my shame. But I think that we can put our energies into more productive things than bashing religion. Mm-hmm. I do believe that there is a place for challenging religion and challenging the hold that religion has in some areas, particularly over civic things that should be, secular. So I do think that we need to protect that division, and I think that we need to point out when something that is being done because of religious beliefs and not because it's being done for the betterment of the community. Mm-hmm. I think we need to point those things out. That's less a problem here in Canada than it is in the United States, but the strength of the secular movement is coming out of the United States. So we have to be aware of that, and we have to address the influence of that here in Canada. But I think Canada has a lot to offer that movement, and I think that we can temper some of the histrionics. And I think that we have a gentler way of doing it. I don't think that we have leaders who have to be rock stars. And I see a lot of that happening in the secular movement, and despair of that, because I think that we need to find ways to work together instead of, trying to grasp the limelight ourselves. And, I don't know. But
that's a good answer.
The U.S. does seem to have a bit of a rock star mentality about every
USA,
kind of thing that they do.
USA. yeah.
All the flipping time.
No offense to our U.S. listeners, but it does sort of.
We still
come
friggin'
across
love
that
you
way.
guys.
America rules.
Well, thank you very much, Greta. We'll let you
you're
go
very
here.
welcome. Okay.
Is there anything that you would? Where can people find your stuff?
Oh yeah. My website is gretavosper.ca. You can find me on Facebook. I've got 2 pages. One is a personal page where I really just post issues and things I'm interested in, and then there's my author page where I talk specifically about the work of creating secular community and religion stuff. And I'm on Twitter, Greta Vosper on Twitter. And you can email me through my website, and I try to respond to everybody who connects with me. Sometimes that takes a day or 2, but I do try to engage with anyone who connects. So do that if
Excellent.
you can.
Great. Does anybody have any final questions?
I just want to thank you for agreeing to be a guest on our show today.
Yes.
It was
on a Friday night at 10:30.
At 10:30. This was wonderful.
Yes,
that was
thank you
great.
very much.
That's great. I appreciate it. And when you guys get over all the shock of this, call me again.
it might take me a day to process.
Yeah, maybe at least a day.
Anyway, you're welcome to join us at West Hill anytime you're in the neighborhood.
Sweet. I have family there, so I might take you up on
good.
that.
That'd be great.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks.
Take care.
Take care, you too.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, so we're going to go to a break, and then we'll be back with some woo.
Yes.
Let me click that.
If you like what we're doing and want to help us keep the lights on, go become a patron at patreon.com/Brainstorm Podcast. You can hear the bonus half hour that we record every episode and get a shout out when you support the show. Become a patron for just $1 an episode at patreon.com/Brainstorm Podcast. Or you can support the show by ordering a t-shirt, mug, or other gear from our store at caffeepress.ca/Brainstorm Podcast Gear. If you can't afford to become a patron or buy gear, then why not give us a rating or write a review on iTunes or Stitcher? Every rating makes it easier for people to find us. Thanks for your support.
We are given one life, full of billions of small and large decisions. To be somebody, to change, to be kind, to give hope, to become a better person, and to leave a lasting impact on this planet. It is a decision to be made every single day while your heart is still beating. We've made our decision. Absence of Clothing, atheist and science-based apparel and merchandise, donating 50% of our profits to charity. Look good and feel good, without God. Check us out at absenceofclothing.com and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest for discount codes and other sweet swag.
Use the code BRAINSTORM at absenceofclothing.com and get 10% off.
Are you done getting your brain stormed?
We here at Packard Pokesat, we poke at beliefs, religion, news, and oddities from across the web.
Join us, along with occasional guest hosts from people in the secular atheist movement,
where we poke at all this and more Friday nights
at vaughnlive.tv/Packard Pokesat.
Okay, Connie, are we done with this promo?
Well, how are they supposed to find us, Packard?
Oh, shit. I forgot about that. I know. They can find us using a compass.
No, that won't work.
Well, they can find us at Packard Pokesat at WordPress.com. Where can they find us? Well, they can
all the way back to Newark.
All the way back in Newark. Well, they can find us. They can find us at Packard Pokes at packardpokes@wordpress.com, Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, and YouTube.
Just don't try the magic 8-ball.
Yeah, I know. I tried that last week, but all I got was try again later.
Okay, we're back. That was a super interesting interview.
Did you hear our minds go?
Yeah, we're still cleaning up with the minds getting blown.
Yeah, the brains are all over the walls. It's a little...
There's still some smudging on the computer monitor.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective that apparently needs more thought.
Yeah,
for us.
Like I said, it was an interesting behind the scenes look.
Right.
I heard her on Ryan Bell's podcast, Life After God, and I mentioned this before we started. But the thing about that was, like, even then, it was hard to wrap my head around. Right. I think, and because it's that whole atheist minister thing. It's that whole belief, like, why do we need to go to a place to be a good person? You know, that was hard, but I think I sort of am starting to understand. And when she talks about community,
I can understand the community aspect of it. And
people need a community, like most people do anyway.
Like civic involvement, I think, and that I think is important. And I wasn't able to, obviously, to articulate that really well before, but
you did better than the rest of us.
You're very kind.
I started it with my foot in my mouth, and I just couldn't quite dislodge it.
I don't know.
But it's better than if you continue swallowing till it comes out your ass.
Yeah,
so that you just pull it out of the mouth and then
Yeah.
Then you're good. At least you can. Yeah.
But when my head and my foot connect right in the ass, I don't know.
It might end up on Vancouver Island.
Yeah. Might be really bad.
All right, so let's kick off some woo.
I'm not a scientist, but if I can tell you your science sucks, then your science really sucks.
That just makes no fucking sense. I mean, it's just bullshit.
Fuck. All right, so we only have one woo story tonight, and it's yours.
It's mine. Oh, I was hoping for that other one. But so I saw this video on Facebook the other week, and PAST Saskatchewan, PAST stands for Paranormal and Supernatural Team Saskatchewan, was at the Globe Theatre because it's their 50th anniversary year. And I don't know if it was a coincidence, but they were going to celebrate by having an investigation there. So they were...
And it's like super duper haunted, right?
It's super duper haunted, a lady and then a dude and a child, were supposedly spotted there in haziness. And so they were doing their introduction. I was
haziness.
Yeah.
They're there and then they're not there, you look, I fucking saw something, and then you didn't fucking see anything.
I can kind of feel the creepiness from here. We're not too far from that Globe Theatre.
We're just a couple blocks away.
I know.
We're just down the block.
Is that the song?
Who should we call?
PAST Saskatchewan. Yeah, that's what we should call them. But so they were doing their introductions, and it was just a 5-minute video, and then they continued to post videos of doing their walkthrough and all of the various sightings people have had there. And they went into the basement, which was really interesting because it's all like connected to Beer Brothers underneath there and stuff, and it just looks cool. There's a little parkade like under the street. Which is kind of neat. So architecturally speaking, it was fascinating. But then it was like, for fuck's sake, you guys. It was brutal.
You should have just muted. Just mute it and then just watch.
In some ways I did. Like, I tuned it out and I was like, that brick is pretty. Look at that exposed brick.
It's architectural porn. Yay!
Nice.
Yes, I subscribe to a lot of architectural porn. But I'm not even to the best nugget of the story. Go ahead.
I'm really hoping that architectural porn is not an actual thing.
I'm sure it is.
Please don't tell me if you know that it is.
Rule 30, what is it? Rule
34?
34 of the internet?
Everything's a porn?
Everything's a porn?
There's food porn. But that's just really pretty pictures of food, right? Pretty
There's
pictures
like a
of buildings.
genuine porn of everything. So.
Yeah.
So, we're sidetracking. Let's
If
back to the
you've
back to the
thought
ghost.
about it,
Your
there's
favorite
a
nugget. Oh,
ghost.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Have you ever heard of a ghost amp? Anyone?
A ghost amp. That's
that
new.
I
It's
went to
not-
the website and I saw a picture. Yeah.
It's not for a ghost band, for a ghost guitar. It's an actual
Is
little
it
tiny.
for your ghost car stereo?
Exactly. You put it in your trunk. Well, that's the subwoofer. Anyways, you have to
amp
like
your subwoofer.
All right.
That's right.
Sorry, what were we talking about?
But for the places where these people had seen these sightings of supposed ghosts, they were going to put these ghost amps and plug these white boxes into the wall, and they boost / amplify ghost activity by providing an unlimited high and low voltage DC energy source. So instead of sapping your video camera battery, the ghost can just use the DC amp to communicate with you.
Fascinating.
A high voltage DC.
And low.
I
Pick one.
I don't know.
High volt. Yeah. Okay.
Don't bring actual physics into discussing
Don't
ghosts.
think too hard about that.
Wait
sir.
a sec.
Yeah.
No, that
right.
does not work.
Just stop. I'm trying to turn off my brain. I'm just telling myself, stop thinking, stop thinking, stop thinking.
So high voltage DC and low voltage DC. Okay.
Pretty much DC as far
All
as
the
I understand
DC,
it.
All the direct current.
All the DC.
Yeah, but as I understand DC, it's all low current, low voltage.
Right.
It high voltage DC is not like really a thing.
I'm not an electrician.
I believe that's why they have to go through transformers.
That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
website was bullshit.
That you should have started with that. I wouldn't have
But
wasted
you know
my
what?
brain
There's
on
a
thinking
disclaimer
about
on
it.
the website that said we are not responsible for the increased paranormal activity.
Ooh.
We are like
That's a lie.
Look, the
They
fuck
are
out.
responsible.
Technically, we gave you this white box that will make ghosts talk.
Why
to you.
is Bill Murray going through my head?
But
we give you a ghost amp,
but
we're not responsible
We're
for the
talking
extra
about
ghosts.
things on apocalyptic level. Cats and dogs living in harmony.
But this just reminded me. I think homeopathic sites should also have a disclaimer: we are not responsible for any cures that may, happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Accidentally or
it's so
intentionally.
bad. But they posted another video later on. I noticed there was like a 6-second clip of like, good thing we did a last minute pass through the theater because we heard somebody say hi on the little EVP or whatever thing. It's like somebody could have.
Pareidolia.
I went through a
was just-
stretch of reading like a lot of ghost stories and some of this kind of ghost haunting shit. The big question is, and I know nothing of the history of the Globe's Theater, but
Neither.
But the thing is generally ghosts, when they haunt a place, there has to be something tragic, something dramatic. There's like that
Yes.
psychic energy.
That's right.
There's something dramatic always happening at the Globe Theater.
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't checked the latest critiques lately. I don't know.
Can someone play those drums quick for Claire's joke?
Yeah.
Those drums in the corner.
You gotta do it.
Can someone please do that?
I need a drum roll. Drum roll, please.
You're in front of the drum set.
Yeah,
right
I
there.
don't know.
The look on Renee's face was awesome.
I should have brought my camera. Oh, wait, we have phones on our camera. Cameras on our phones.
I thought I was supposed to be the smart ass here. Fuck. But that's just it. So there was a small child murdered at the Globe Theater.
Quite possibly, because
yeah.
people they were talking about, they were excited because, and I want to find, because their show is on Access 7. For those of you listening that want to listen or find their show, they don't have anything on YouTube, but they got picked up by Access last year, and they're in Ninette, Manitoba, investigating the sanatorium there.
So they're on Access 7.
They're on cable TV.
Yeah, access.
Oh
cable.
wow, access. That's local access. That's
Local.
Like it's like
Yeah,
any schmuck can do it.
But I thought we were better than that.
No,
I never watched
Wayne's World. Wayne's World.
Wee-hoo, Saskatchewan? No.
Hey, I
It's the home of high impact wrestling.
I guess.
yeah.
There is that.
But then again, high impact wrestling is still slightly better than this.
It's more
way
real.
better.
Yeah, it's more real.
It's more.
It doesn't claim to be real. That's the
Yeah,
difference.
and they call it entertainment. So it's
Sports entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my story. That was my Woo report.
Good stuff.
Contribution.
So they used EVP, which I printed off the Wikipedia definition of that.
Please share it with us.
The electronic voice phenomenon.
Oh.
Because where they looking quickly at the history, I won't go too deep into it. Is basically it started with the idea because it was an offshoot of the spiritualism of the early 1900s, and where they started thinking that to trap the supernatural, that's where they started recording this stuff, and that's where you get your white noise, and then they can hear things.
There was a Michael Keaton movie about that.
Which one was that?
I think it was very creatively called White Noise.
Yes, I think so. Yes. And it was a very clearly not a scary movie.
Poltergeist was scary, and they used it too, right?
That's true.
The white noise, and they're
here.
and the hands coming out of the TV. So,
Poltergeist was so much better than White Noise, though.
Yeah.
I've actually been on a ghost hunt here locally, formally.
Oh, was that right?
Yeah.
Share that with us.
I mean, I don't want to say too much, but I mean, yeah, the same kind of thing where we recorded the noise, and then we had these. They were hilarious. There were these meters that were supposed to track electromagnetic activity or something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And they were actually labeled ghost meter. And it was like clearly they ordered them off eBay or something, and
wow.
And so we had these things walking around, and of course they're going to go off sometimes because there's electromagnetic activity everywhere.
That's right.
Yeah.
If there's wiring in your building,
it's just like I've seen on where they start doing thermal imaging, because the whole idea is when they cross the plane, they suck heat out of a room, so there's a cold spot. Oh, there's a cold spot. Oh, there's a cold spot.
Yeah.
It's it's also called an old drafty building. It's bound to fucking happen.
Well, that's just it. We were in a really old, classic building in town, and I'm not allowed to say the building because they didn't want anybody to release the name. But either way,
that's interesting.
Either way, they
don't want anybody to know it's haunted.
Well, they don't want attention. The organization doesn't want attention. They just ask people.
Well, because they don't want a bunch of yahoos coming in going, I heard there's ghosts here.
Yeah, they just asked these people to come. I was part of this group 10 years ago, and it was just something to do for fun.
That stuff yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, so we went there and did all this overnight investigation and whatnot, and
that would have been fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was kind of frustrating at times though too. I was I was operating the camera, and I was wandering around and whatever, and it was late at night, and then we did this one girl. Speaking of the tragic events, so this one girl. Who was a psychic apparently. Decided that she was talking to some children spirits who were there, and there was some evil man who had hurt them, and she was helping them go towards the light, and we sat there for a fucking hour, and I'm sitting there with this camera just let's get out of here. This is so stupid. You're not experiencing anything. We're literally just sitting here talking to a wall for an hour.
You're making it up.
I made this huge backstory up about this tragic event that happened. It just, oh my gosh.
Jeez.
But there's a part of me that would actually kind of enjoy going on one of those trips.
It was fun. It was fun.
Me too.
Just to. I know by the end of the evening I would not be friends with any of the people there, but I would try very, very hard to be nice.
Just humor them a little bit.
Yeah. Oh shit! I just felt something. Did
you hear that knocking?
It would be really cool if something actually did happen, but of course nothing happened. But I mean, there was me and another skeptic there, and we were kind of just hanging out with each other and talking about stuff and questioning everything the whole time. It was really funny actually.
That's good.
Anyway.
I like that. I like that.
Jeez.
I don't know. Like, there's been how many other shows out there that do the ghost hunting, and it's all the same kind
I
of.
loved all of those shows.
Yeah, I mean they're,
Every single one of them.
entertaining to a certain extent.
Mhm.
Although I have seen a couple memes, and I did laugh at them. Like there was one, some woman's at a German castle somewhere, and I feel a presence, and they start trying to communicate with the ghost, and it's like you're yelling out in English. You're talking to 100-year-old German ghosts. You know, like
I saw that meme.
yeah, I'm
that
like,
was good.
I don't think they're going to talk to you. You know,
No.
Jeez.
Like the language barrier doesn't necessarily go away, does it? Like
yeah, I don't know. I mean, if people
It's beyond the veil. You don't
beyond the
know.
veil. But I mean, if they're
It's magic. There's things and stuff. Well, and English works.
See,
no
the thing
worries.
is if they die and they're trapped between this world and the next,
They speak all languages.
Yeah, we need more. We need more Rammstein.
We need more Rammstein.
But if they're stuck in this realm, if they're stuck in this realm,
Yeah.
and the general idea is they're usually stuck in the same clothes that they died in, they're probably stuck in the same language. That, you know.
yes.
Don't bring logic into this.
No.
I'm still trying to use ghost hunting logic here.
This is
Transcends logic.
make believe. We can say whatever we want.
Exactly.
All right. Let's do some outro stuff. Let's do some music, Dave.
How do you think so?
I would hope so. Cool. This is music. Thanks, Rob and Nathan, our patrons, are still our only two patrons. Come
You guys
on,
are
folks.
awesome. We
The
need
more support we get, the better we can do. Well, no. That's a lie. But it makes...
Don't promise shit you can't deliver.
It takes less money out of my pocket to make this show happen.
But if we get more patrons, we will try really, really hard.
Better guests.
Yes, that's right. We'll try
No.
really, really hard.
We had a
No,
good
no
guest.
better guests. We've got
We
a
got some
great
really good
lineup
guests.
the next few
We've
weeks.
had a really good lineup.
We've got even
and
more.
it's coming up.
Yeah, we've got
It's
even
been
more.
awesome.
Okay, so we'll record another half hour for the patrons. You can get that bonus content by becoming a patron at patreon.com/brainstormpodcast. Patrons get a full ad-free episodes the day before the regular feed, including the music portion, which apparently lots of people really appreciate. I know some people, yeah, so there. Splitting the episodes makes it tough to include all the music in both halves, but I include it in the Patreon feed. If you want to join us for the next live broadcast, follow us on Spreaker. Just enter Brainstorm Podcast into the Spreaker search bar, or you can go to our website, brainstormblog.net, and check out the live show and the upcoming events page. There are some upcoming conferences in Canada. There's the annual non-conference this year in Niagara Falls on August 13th. There's the AB Secular Conference on September 15th. The non-conference is live streaming for people who can't make it. Check out the website. I'll post a link to the Facebook page. I'm sure they have a link to the website there. It $19 for live streaming if you can't get to Niagara Falls. Remember to rate us and write a review on iTunes and Stitcher, and always hit the subscribe button. The more people who subscribe on iTunes, the easier it is to find us. Remember to rate. Oh yeah, I already read that. God damn it. Thanks, Dave, for our intro music. Thanks to Alex Capper-Murdoch for the voiceover for the intro and some of our ads. And thank you to Jason Camo for our outro music. You can find his stuff at aloststateofmind.com. All music played is either with permission or under the SOCAN license to play. For more information on SOCAN, you can check out the music license info page on our website, brainstormblog.net. You can get our gear at cafepress.ca/brainstormpodcastgear, and you can email us at mail@brainstormblog.net. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in a couple weeks when we have Callie Wright from the Gaytheist Manifesto podcast on to answer all our ignorant questions about trans people. I'm sorry, Kelly. Thanks, and have a good one.
Thank you.
Wanted to say thanks to everyone who listens to us, shares the show, gives us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or supports us through Patreon and Gumroad. We don't have a lot of interaction sometimes with our listeners, but what we have had proves that we attract some of the best people around. Smart, kind, and cool. An audience truly worthy of the titles hardcore and woo-free. Thanks for helping us make the world a smarter place.
This is an opinion-based podcast. Each person on the podcast is responsible for their own opinions, and those opinions don't necessarily reflect the views of the rest of the panel. Any guests or anyone associated with the people on the podcast, such as spouses, partners, children, other family members, friends, or employers. No one person speaks for the podcast with the possible exception of Corey, and he doesn't speak for anyone else on the show. The Brainstorm podcast does not represent the views of our sponsors.